Hello everyone and welcome to the Citrix Masterclass. We hope you enjoyed our What's New video, which you can find linked in the description below. We are happy to be able to dive further into the content for you. My name is Stephen Gallagher, a Principal Product Marketing Manager at Citrix, and I will be your host today. In this Masterclass session, we will deep dive into the Citrix Secure Private Access on premises and Citrix Autoscale. However, before we begin, I want to make a few announcements. Our Masterclasses this year will run quarterly and last approximately 45 to 60 minutes. We have some exciting content and speakers lined up that cover our entire portfolio, so make sure you stay tuned for the upcoming masterclasses. This session is being recorded and a link will be sent after the event. You can also submit any questions via the Q&A tab, and we will answer them via chat here as they come in. Thanks again for joining us. So let's get started. For today's Masterclass first topic, we will be discussing the Citrix Secure Private Access on-premises solution that enhances an organization's overall security compliance posture with the ability to easily deliver zero-trust access to browser-based apps, using Citrix Storefront as a unified access portal to web and SaaS apps, along with virtual apps and desktops as an integrated part of Citrix Workspace. This session will demonstrate the admin and user experience of Citrix Secure Private Access on-premises features. I'm very excited to welcome Rainer Hasenzagel, Principal Product Manager at Citrix. Rainer, welcome to the Citrix Masterclass.
Thanks a lot, Stephen. I'm happy to have me as speaker today.
Right.
So, I'm a Principal Product Marketing Manager for Citrix Secure Private Access. And before jumping into the product details, I first want to set the context. In a hybrid world where virtual and non-virtual applications are hosted on-prem or in the cloud, we must find a way to access them securely. Securely, what does this mean? Keep the front door as secure as possible and then you can access everything? No, I don't think that's the right way. A zero-trust-based approach is the better option.
So, Rainer, what does a zero trust stand for?
That's a good question. Zero Trust stands for never trust and always verify each user request. Citrix has been doing this for virtual apps for a long time by leveraging adaptive authentication and access technology.
But what about our non-virtual apps?
Also a good question. Citrix Secure Private Access allows us to extend the CVIRT virtual deployment by natively adding zero trust access to web and SaaS apps. This allows a faster time to market and to use a common framework. Also, it allows us to enhance the user experience with a unified portal to launch virtual and non-virtual apps the same way while providing a single sign-on, and to control the web and SaaS traffic on the last mile with Citrix Enterprise Browser.
Okay, but that sounds good, but this is a cloud-only solution at the moment?
No, Stephen, that's not right. Secure Private Access meets the customers in their Zero Trust access journey. We offer Secure Private Access as a cloud service for customers already in the cloud and as a complete on-prem solution for customers who cannot or do not want to use a cloud service. The on-prem solution is designed to leverage Storefront and NetScaler Gateway from the customer's existing infrastructure.
Brilliant. So SPA's on-premise sounds like a fantastic solution. So can you tell me some more about it?
Sure. Let's look a bit at the key features. So the first one, Zero Trust Network access to internal web and SaaS apps. VPNs are challenging to scale, provide a poor end-user experience, fall out of security requirements, and don't meet today's modern use cases around bring your own device and the granularity of access policies. So Secure Private Access is a zero trust network access offering to all enterprise applications and provides the best end user experience. So talking a bit about the adaptive authentication, NetScaler Gateway provides a capability to scan an end user device before and after a user session is established. Based on the user location and device posture assessment results, an admin can define how they want to authenticate users to their enterprise apps. This allows customers to implement the same authentication policy framework across the Citrix virtual apps infrastructure and non-CVAD environments. Adaptive access and security policies. So for modern browser-based apps, secure private access enables IT to provide granularity with security controls like anti-key logging, anti-screen capturing, watermarks, restricting copy and paste, printing downloads, and more to prevent unauthorized use of any sensitive or corporate data. Next, the single sign-on to modern browser-based applications is provided by Netscaler Gateway and Citrix Enterprise Browser. Citrix Enterprise Browser, just mentioned it. Citrix Enterprise Browser is a locally installed browser deployed with Citrix Workspace app. It combines the user experience for accessing browser-based enterprise applications, Citrix browser-based enterprise applications. Citrix Enterprise Browser enforces per-app inline security controls defined by IT. And one of the important things is visibility and monitoring. Secure Private Access has an integrated troubleshooting log dashboard to quickly identify issues on application launch, app enumeration, and more. So let's see how everything fits together in the SP on-prem solution architecture. The architecture looks the same as we leverage the components used for virtual apps and desktops. A quick recap on how it works. Citrix Workspace app connect through the Netscaler Gateway, and apps are displayed in Citrix Workspace app.
So looking at that architecture, it looks like nothing really new. So when does SPA come into this environment?
Excellent question. Again, the SPA plugin is a new component delivered with CVAD version 2308 and later. It can be installed with the desktop delivery controller and as an upgrade, or using the standalone feature installer for LTSR versions. We recommended installing the SPA plugin on the storefront server, but this is not a requirement. It can also be installed on a standalone server. But okay, let's look at how the app enumeration process has changed. Besides requesting virtual apps and desktops from the desktop delivery controller, the storefront server also requests apps from the SPA application. Citrix Workspace app shows virtual and non-virtual apps similarly. So now the user starts the internal SharePoint web app. Because it's a web app, Citrix Enterprise Browser opens and connects to the Netscaler Gateway. The Netscaler Gateway dynamically verifies the user is authorized and grants or denies access. In our case, the user is authorized to access the application. Netscaler Gateway passes the user's web request to the SharePoint server and provides a single sign-on. Citrix Enterprise Browser does the last mile security, displays a watermark, restricts copy and paste, and more, based on the configured SPA app access policy. It's worth mentioning that URLs are not rewritten to overcome web app issues. This allows, for example, to directly access internal links out of documents, emails, wherever. Accessing SaaS applications in Citrix Enterprise Browser can be done directly, or if, for example, the SaaS app is configured with an IP restriction, via Netscaler Gateway. Let's see how the components work together. By using the power of Netscaler Adaptive Authentication, companies can overcome the vulnerabilities associated with weak passwords by combining a rich set of different authentication methods. Device posture or endpoint analysis scans work with adaptive access policies to control application access by sending contextual tags to secure private access. Now, let's take a brief look at the adaptive authentication user experience. The user starts the Citrix Workspace app and connects to the on-prem Citrix environment. First, a device posture scan happens to determine if this device is trusted or untrusted. In this case, it's an untrusted device, and therefore the user has to provide multiple authentication factors. Once the login is done, Citrix Workspace app shows the applications and desktops the user is allowed to. Because this is an untrusted device, the user is allowed only to access 2 web applications. Now, the user is switching devices and connects to the same Citrix environment again. The device posture scan classifies the device as a trusted device, and the user is prompted only with a single factor. After a successful logon, the user is allowed to access more than just the 2 applications. With the introduction of adaptive access and security controls, secure private access can drive application access and enforce security controls based on different trust factors. So admin can create access policies and prioritize the execution order based on user roles, network locations, or device posture results to adaptively allow access and/or enforce application protection controls when accessing applications through secure private access. The troubleshooting log dashboard is the right place to quickly identify issues with application enumeration or access. Now, let's briefly examine the admin experience of configuring an SPA application and access policy, as well as the user experience accessing the application. First, we create an application. We have to select the application location, specify an application name. We can apply a custom icon for application, make it a favorite application, specify a custom category, and finally, we have to set the web application, the web URL. Now that the application is created, let's create and assign an access policy. We select the application name, specify the user group, and configure an contextual tag to allow, for example, only trusted devices. Next, we specify the access. In this case, the user is allowed to access the application with restrictions. For demo purpose, we select all. Lastly, we give the policy a name and enable it. That's it. So now let's look what the end user view will look like. The user is on a trusted device and starts the internet portal. A watermark is displayed and restrictions are applied for copy and paste. Also, printing is not allowed, and downloading as well. Also, when the user tries to create a screenshot, it gets blocked, and the application inside of the enterprise browser will be completely grayed out. But how can the IT admin identify issues? Looking at the troubleshooting log dashboard, the admin finds the events to see what application the user is allowed for. So the first event shows all the applications the user is allowed for and what contextual tag killer sense from examining the device posture. And second, when the user starts the application, we see exactly what policy was enforced. So secure private access is designed to allow access from a managed and unmanaged device the same way. To grant just enough permissions and apply appropriate security controls when accessing applications, Citrix Workspace app and Citrix Enterprise Browser is required. But what happens when a user uses the native browser to access Storefront? Let's take a brief look at the user experience when accessing Storefront with the native browser. The user starts his native browser and connects to his on-prem environment. A device posture scan checks and classifies the device. In our case, it's a trusted device, and the user gets a single factor logon. After successful login, the user can only access Citrix virtual apps because we want to ensure the highest possible security, which is not possible using a native browser. Okay, so now let's look at our 3 common use cases. The first use case is secure access for employees and contractors to internal web and SaaS apps from managed and unmanaged devices without publishing a browser or using a VPN. For example, customers have to deploy silos to allow contractors access to one and more web applications using a published browser. With SPA and Citrix Enterprise Browser, we can remove those silos and allow access using the same entry point for all users to reduce complexity and operational costs. The second use case would be providing comprehensive last-mile zero-trust enforcement with an admin configurable browser security control for internal web and SaaS apps from managed and unmanaged devices without publishing a browser or using a VPN. So what does it mean? Consolidating all virtual web and SaaS applications in a unified portal enhances the user experience a lot. By launching web and SaaS apps from the unified portal, Citrix Enterprise Browser opens and enforces security settings directly on the user's device. With this, we remove the need for a VPN connection or published browser. And the third use case is especially for accelerate merge and acquisition users to access across multiple identity providers to ensure consistent security and provide seamless end-user app access across multiple user groups. With the integration of merge and acquisition users into an existing environment, it is complex and takes a lot of time. For example, to access company resources, each user needs a new user account and has to deal with multiple passwords. To allow a faster onboarding and access to company resources, SPA enables the integration of multiple identity providers for authentication and provides contextual access as well. So, for more information on SPA on-prem, we have created a dedicated section on Citrix documentation and Citrix Taxon website. If you are new to secure private access and zero trust network access, we have an intro section with briefs and videos to help you understand the solution's technology. And to wrap up, I want to highlight some of the key differentiators between Citrix Secure Private Access on-prem and other ZTNA solutions. With adaptive authentication, adaptive access, adaptive security controls, Citrix Secure Private Access offers unparalleled comprehensive security. It gives you a unified access, a consistent user experience by having a single consolidated launch point and a managed enterprise browser, including a single sign-on capability to web and SaaS apps. And it is the only industry solution to provide secure access to all your virtual web and SaaS apps. Enterprises get a better privacy and scale, so SPA on-prem does not require cloud services. It allows you to scale based on your needs and requirements without additional costs on the on-premise side. And finally, it provides a much better user experience.
For the second topic in today's masterclass, we will discuss and delve into the inner workings of Autoscale, where we'll show you how to configure it most effectively to drastically reduce the cloud costs while still maintaining users' experience. I'm pleased to be joined today by Paul Murray, the Principal Product Marketing Manager at Citrix.
I'm going to cover, like Steve said, the sort of inner workings of Autoscale. Before I do that, I always talk about this. I've got a little boy, Jaden, he's 6.5 years old now, he's got Down syndrome. So I live in Sweden, which is why it's sort of rockasockerna in Swedish. But basically, any presentation I'll do, I'll talk about Down syndrome awareness. So that's that, and on to the technical stuff. So, like Steve said, I'm going to be talking about Autoscale. So we've got about 20-25 minutes to cover some of the stuff around Autoscale. To be honest, we're not going to be able to get through everything that Autoscale can do in that short a time. So I'll say it now. I'm going to put out a blog next week or in a couple of weeks around some of the stuff that we don't cover. I can talk about more about that at the end. But what I'd like to do in the next sort of 20 minutes is talk around the basic config around Autoscale and what you can achieve with that. So this isn't necessarily technical, but as we've all seen over the last few years, the way we work has changed. Now, not going into all the stuff around COVID and not going into all the return to office stuff, but essentially behind all that are two sort of technologies or two ways of working, two ways of hosting those applications, those desktops. They can be on-prem, they can be desktop as a service or cloud-based. What we're seeing a lot more recently is a lot of those deployments are becoming hybrid. So essentially, we need a set of technologies that allows us to be able to run those workloads and provide the best employee experience, regardless of where that employee is connecting from, regardless of where those actual workloads, your virtual apps and desktops, are actually running, whether it be on-prem based or cloud-based. I'm not going to go through the numbers. They change depending on which sort of analyst you start talking to or listen to. So first of all, what is Autoscale? What's its purpose in life? So Autoscale is essentially it's a set of technologies that allows a Citrix deployment, whether that be desktop as a service or cloud-based or CVAD, so virtual apps and desktop on-premise based. It allows those workloads to dynamically scale based on certain metrics. Those metrics could be schedule-based, they could be load-based, they could have dynamic timeouts. But essentially, like I said, it scales to ensure that the employees can access those resources when they need to access them. But it also, one of the main things around Autoscale is to reduce the overall cost in running and providing those services to employees. So it minimizes TCO, the total cost of ownership, increases your return on investment. But like I said, we ensure that the optimal employee experience is always met. In comparison to other technologies, Citrix Autoscale is hybrid cloud aware. It's multi-cloud aware. So we've got the ability to support many public clouds, but also on-prem or private cloud technologies. So again, Autoscale can be applied to a lot of different workloads, a lot of different scenarios. So how Autoscale works, very simply put, is we analyze data that's been collected from several sources. So those could be usage patterns, how often, when the users log on, stuff like that. It can be changes in demand. So again, going back historically, I mean, the Citrix technology has been around for quite a few years now. One of those basic concepts back then was a thing called a load index. So how loaded up that server is. And we still use that sort of underlying technology to understand what's that given load on that server or on that infrastructure, and then correspondingly adjust the amount of virtual machines that are available for users to be able to connect to and stuff like that. We can also use defined schedules. So very simplistic stuff, such as users come in at 9 o'clock in the morning. We need those machines to be available at 9 o'clock in the morning. They go home at 5. We don't want them running at 5. So we just power those machines down.
Yeah, so it's really flexible depending on the use case. So if I knew what my users were doing in the environment, I could actually set it specifically. So like call centers where they would have specific hours, I can do it based on a time basis. But maybe for financial traders that sort of the peaks, etc., are different, then I can use that sort of usage pattern to determine my scale then.
I mean, it's exactly that. As simplistic as it sounds, it essentially says these machines need to be available for these users. When those users don't need, or when the employees don't need those machines, power them down. Why waste money? Again, that can be on-prem or cloud-based. It doesn't really matter. So essentially, it determines which resources, like you said, are needed, when they are needed. And technically, it informs or it tells the underlying hypervisor, the power control systems, to spin those machines up or spin those machines down. So the first thing in today's world with DaaS is it needs to be enabled. So I can talk about this and all the fancy features. If you don't enable it, you're not going to be able to use the Autoscale stuff. this feature is there. Enable it, so you can use it. It's part of the product, and it's going to allow you to significantly reduce the cost of running those virtual machines. I've got an example here of Linux developers. So they typically use a Linux desktop. So I've got Ubuntu. I've got another example there on the same screens with the inside sales team. So they're using Windows desktops. They've got different work patterns. So what we see here is the top one is the Windows 11 schedule. So that's been defined for the inside sales teams. And what you see there is in the middle of the screen, or the middle of the screenshot, that's when most of those machines are powered on. It's also got a corresponding peak time, so we can define how many machines are powered on across that peak time. You can apply that to weekends or weekdays, or any combination of days that you want. In the example on the bottom for the Linux developers, we've got the peak schedule time is out of hours, and during the day, we have fewer machines powered on. In the mornings or early morning, late at night, there are more machines powered on. So again, we can create those different configurations and apply those to different delivery groups as is required. There's a few common settings, so go through those very quickly. But again, it's all about being flexible, being adaptable. Yeah, okay, ignore those memes. He's the one that didn't log out. But it's about being adaptable with the technology. So one thing I've always said over the years is we can use the technology based on a customer's requirements rather than adapting a customer's needs to the underlying or the given technology. So the product is very, very flexible to be able to meet the customer's needs. So go through some of the settings that we can actually configure. So first of all, a schedule or load-based scaling. As the name says, it's very simplistic. We basically or essentially define the schedule. We define the time frame. So in this example, go back to the inside sales teams. They need their Windows 11 desktops from Monday to Friday from 9 till 5 in the evening. But what we also see here as part of that schedule for the inside sales teams is on the Fridays, it could be that they are doing end of week sales processing or something else which entails or which requires that we need more machines or more resources to be available at the end of the week. So essentially we define a Monday to Thursday with what have we got here? 8 machines running from sort of 8 o'clock until 5:30ish. And then there is a Friday one where the machines start to power up a little bit earlier and they power down a little bit later. So again, very flexible in how you create these schedules for the users based on the requirements. Another one is then dynamic session timeouts. So imagine the situation where you've got your inside sales team. They've got their resources powered up, so the VMs powered up during the day. But some of those guys, naturally, they have tea breaks, coffee breaks, lunch breaks, or whatever. So they're going to go to lunch, which means for an hour or 60 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever, there's a period during that day where those resources aren't necessarily being used. So we can base the auto scaling or the power control management, if you want, on idle session timeouts. So how long that session has been sitting there doing nothing. We can also adapt that or adjust that based on the peak time, so the 9 to 5 sessions, or the off-peak time, so outside of that 9 to 5 time scales. And again, in this example, I've got an example here of we wait for 10 minutes before it's idle, and then we can disconnect it, or we can log it out. I'll come to that in a few seconds.
I think that's important, as we move to sort of having the resources hosted by a cloud provider, where rather than it being on-prem, where the machine's built and it's running, where if this is being charged per minute, that this can significantly reduce our costs by having this configured. So it's just a change in sort of attitude to say, I need to reduce my costs.
And it's like you say, it's all about flexibility. This is more, I would say, targeted towards a cloud-based environment. But If you look at the sustainability story that's coming out a lot, again, we've had this for many, many years with power control management. But you have your on-prem data centers. You don't necessarily want 100 servers just running there doing nothing. So if sustainability is an important part of your overall message as a company, if you want, then you can apply this to on-prem sessions as well. So you power down those virtual machines that are on-prem. So it's not just a cloud story. So again, with the session timeouts, we can influence those peak times, those non-peak times. As part of the user experience or the employee experience, or when we get to that situation where we need to disconnect sessions or log off sessions, there's two ways of doing it. You can just disconnect and say nothing, so force the user off. So what Autoscale does, or what Autoscale offers, is two ways to do that. You can notify the user and log them off. So a polite message saying, we're going to shut down the systems in 10 minutes. You may want to, or you've not been doing anything for 10 minutes. We're going to disconnect you. Or we can send log off reminders without forcing that log off. So again, based on requirements of the IT department or whatever, we can adjust how those sessions are disconnected, whether it's a forced or whether it's a forcing.
Yeah, and again, that's empowering the users to sort of help with that, either cost saving or the sustainability. And again, we've seen that with other features within Citrix Workspace, where we can sort of inform the user that their session is going to be disconnected, and would it be preferred if they actually signed out because of the benefits of shutting down the machine. So
another example, and this is how we can use the real power of Autoscale. Use the real power of the hybrid multi-cloud story that we tell. So being able to build a cloud burst deployment using Autoscale and dynamic provisioning. So before we go through the example, what is this autoscaling with tag machines, or what am I trying to explain when I talk about cloud burst? It's the ability to be able to create a delivery group that's been populated with machines from catalogs that could be on-prem and cloud-based. So what the employee sees is the application they want to use. What the employee doesn't know is, where is that application coming from? Is it coming from an on-prem machine, or is it coming from a cloud-based machine? So how we achieve this is by using the tagging method, or the tagging abilities in Citrix DaaS. So what we see there on the left-hand side in the screenshot there is I've actually got a delivery group which consists of machines from an on-prem machine catalog. So that is my Windows 2022 on AHV. And then I have a further set of machines, so there's 5 machines there, that come from Windows 2022 on Azure. So essentially I created a delivery group that is populated with machines from 2 different worlds, on-prem and off-prem, or on-prem and cloud-based. I then need to associate a tag to that delivery group, basically telling it which machines to power control. So in this case, I want to power control the cloud burst machines, or the machines that come from the cloud or the Azure environment. I then enable that tag, and then I've basically created a cloud burst scenario. So how does that look in reality? So again, like I said, create the cloud burst machine catalogs, and then apply that on-prem and cloud-based tags to the respective catalog. So I have one here is 2022 on AHV, and then 2022 on Azure. The second part of that process is then to create, or to associate the tags, and then to create that delivery group. So my Windows desktops or my applications that I provide to the users. So pulling out the machines from those 2 delivery groups, defining the users, defining the identifiers, what it's called and stuff like that. Then do the same for the second machine, for the other machines from the second catalog. So first of all, the on-prem stuff, and then secondly, the cloud-based stuff. What I see here, looking in the DaaS console or the cloud console, is as soon as I create that delivery group, those machines are powered on. So I've got 3 machines in this case from on-prem, 3 machines cloud-based, and they're all registered, up and running. There is no Autoscale involved in that at the moment. as soon as I enable Autoscale, so go back to the first step, that tip, enable Autoscale, I then select that tag that I want to power control or want to use as a power control reference if you want. So in this case, the Cloudburst machines, I then enable it. I can set a buffer, stuff like that. So we'll come into that later on. I then enable it, so save it. It's then committed. And what then happens is some of those machines will start to power down based on the Autoscale technology. So what you see here is the first 3 machines that go down are the cloud-based machines, so coming from Azure. There is one then from the on-prem stuff. So the third one in that line is unregistered, is powered off. And then as the load reduces, or as the time goes on, so it takes a couple of minutes to apply it, the remaining machines are then powered off until we have just one powered on that can accept connections. And then again, based on the load index, I could come to that in a few minutes, more machines are going to start to power up. So as users start to log on, it's going to consume virtual machines that are on-prem. It's then going to get to the point, I've got no more on-prem machines, and then start to power up and start to consume resources from your cloud-based environment. So again, it's very simple.
Yeah, but with that, Paul, it could also be 2 cloud providers. So within Azure, I could have that first machine catalog being my Azure reserved instances, which I've paid for, and then I could create another machine catalog with pay as you go. So therefore, in that scenario, I would use the sort of the free, the Azure machines that I've already committed cost to. And then in the scenario where I needed additional machines, then I'm still using Azure and I'm just bursting into that additional capacity. And again, it could be a mix of different providers.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, so the example is probably a strange example that I've showed a few times is I started my company started as a cloud-based company. So we were all based on Azure. And then I wanted to migrate to on-prem. So I spin up I'll say Nutanix cluster. It's got the on-prem stuff running there. And I can cloud burst to on-prem. So the opposite way. Why? That will give you a chance to be able to test, does the on-prem stuff work as I want? And once that's working okay, I basically decommission the cloud stuff. So there's a few ways where we can use this Autoscale and Cloudburst and that sort of scenario. And essentially what we get is what I got here, what the employees see is, so this is the new look and feel to workspace, is I selected the Cloudburst application group, and under there I see Calculator, Chrome, the applications that have been published. Okay, I've identified them with Cloudburst. I mean, typically in the real world, you wouldn't have that, but what the employee sees is his icon. It doesn't matter. He doesn't know where those applications are coming from. So I want to talk about dynamic provisioning, but before we go through that, the concept of load balancing and load indexes. So this has changed recently, the ability to be able to do load balancing, whether that is horizontal balancing or vertical balancing, but associate that to a specific delivery group. So you could have multiple different delivery groups in your environment. You may want to be able to vertically load balance some of them. You may want to be able to horizontally load balance some of them. The difference is horizontal load balancing is going to try and share those applications or share those users across all of the virtual machines in that delivery group or in that delivery group. Whereas vertical load balancing is going to essentially stack the users on top of each other until the resources on that virtual machine are fully consumed according to a load index. What that means is you're going to use fewer virtual machines to run or to be able to host your users. Again, it's entirely up to you based on requirements, how you deploy the load balancing, whether it's horizontal or vertical load balancing.
I think this is a brilliant feature. So as you mentioned previously, this was a sort of a site level setting where you set horizontal or vertical. Now we're sort of given that flexibility to set it on the delivery group level. So great.
So, I mean, an example of how we can use that. So this Cloudburst with dynamic provisioning. I haven't got screenshots, so I'm not going to go through screenshots. We're running out of time. I mentioned at the start, I want to put out a blog in a couple of weeks or maybe a few days, which goes through how to actually set up this dynamic provisioning. But what we see there, so first of all, bottom left is a screenshot of some policies. So by way of making it easier to demo, I've set the load index to be fully loaded when a single user has connected to that virtual machine. So I've simply got a policy there. It's my cloudburst policy. I said fully loaded when a user or a single user has connected to that virtual machine. The example with dynamic provisioning is I've got my on-prem and my Azure world, and my cloud-based world. Okay, old screenshot, you see that, Windows 2019. But the first users start to connect up. So the first user connects to to a session that consumes a session on the first server on-prem. And what we see there, because of this policy, the load index is 10,000, which means fully loaded. So when the second user connects up, the Autoscale is going to kick in. It's going to say, I don't have any on-prem resources. So it's going to connect it to an Azure-based virtual machine. Process carries on. Again, it's set to 10,000, so it's fully loaded. Third user logs on. They're going to need to start to connect to a new machine. Autoscale, like I said, starts new virtual machines in Azure, based on what we saw a few minutes ago. So the third user connects to a different virtual machine. The dynamic provisioning comes in when I've got 3 virtual machines in that delivery group. What happens when user 4 connects up, or when additional users connect up? So what we can do is we can use task scheduler, or we can use some sort of monitoring in the back end to basically kick off a PowerShell command. Again, I haven't got them in screenshots, but it essentially kicks off PowerShell commands to provision virtual machines that Autoscale can then use to power up, to make sure, or to provide additional resources for those users to be able to connect to. So like I said, I'm going to put this together in a few PowerShell scripts in a blog in a few weeks' time. But basically, by using Autoscale, by using the tag-in, by using the cloudburst, we can enhance that, if you want, with dynamic provisioning. So fourth user connects up. There's a machine sitting there, load 0. When the user connects up, it's going to go 1,000, and the process continues. So all based on the basics of power control management, the basics of Autoscale. So summarize how Autoscale ensures the employee experience. So we talked about a couple of them around the load balancing, so vertical and horizontal, things like that. We talked about load indexes. That's how you can also influence the user experience, make sure that the users are connecting to machines that have enough resources. One that I don't have screenshots for here is to use the monitoring, so the analytics and monitoring. We're going to get an indication of how those virtual machines are running in the back end. We're going to get an insight into the costs associated with running those virtual machines. But essentially, Autoscale is there to be able to do 2 things. First of all, ensure a better TCO ROI. And secondly, to ensure that those resources are available when users need to be able to connect to their applications and to their desktops. Closing words, like I said, this is the new look and feel from Workspace. So the reason I got this is I talk about other stuff, not just Autoscale. But in here we've got the cloudburst as an example. User just gets the application, sets the application icons that he wants to be able to use, and he doesn't need to know where they're coming from. The fully blown picture, I got Windows and Azure, Linux and Azure, AHV if you want, or HCI. But like we talked about earlier, it's cloudburst to AHV, from AHV to Azure. The access to Intel apps through secure private access. That's basically it.
Thank you very much, Paul. So really to recap, it's really good to see the Citrix Autoscale feature come to virtual apps and desktops on premise. I think, we could work together on the blog to put together some more examples of, especially the cloudburst with the dynamic provisioning. And, I think there are going to be sort of enhancements to the Citrix Autoscale going forward, again, to add more capabilities to it, and especially around the monitoring of it and alerting of the usage of Autoscale. So I'm looking forward to seeing those come to the product too. Thanks to my guest speakers, Rainer and Paul, for covering the Citrix Secure Private Access and Autoscale topics. Thank you for your questions in the chat. We will look to create a blog with the questions and answers submitted in this session, along with a link to the on-demand recording of this masterclass session. I look forward to catching everyone on the next Citrix Masterclass episode.